You've been told your whole life, speak up, be assertive, don't stay silent. But what if everything you were taught about power was backwards? What if the real power doesn't come from speaking, but from choosing not to? In nature, the predator that announces itself dies hungry. The lion doesn't roar before the kill. The eagle doesn't scream before it dives. And humans? The same law applies. The moment you feel the need to respond, to be seen, to be heard, you've already surrendered the upper hand. Every unnecessary word leaks energy. Every anxious gesture bleeds status. The person who can sit in silence, comfortably, without defending, explaining, or reacting, becomes the gravitational center of the room. You're in a room, a meeting. Someone says something wrong. You feel it, the urge to correct them, to speak, to prove. Your fingers twitch, your breath quickens. You want to cut in, be heard, set the record straight. Around you, chaos, talking over each other, polite performance, attention scattered. But then, one person who doesn't speak, doesn't flinch, doesn't move, they just sit there, utterly still. And when they finally do open their mouth, the entire room falls silent. Not because of what they say, but because of what they withheld. This is the power you were never taught, the kind that doesn't chase attention, it draws it. This is the psychology of control without force, influence without effort, power without noise. What you're witnessing is what Carl Jung discovered decades ago, the most powerful psychological force that exists. Power flows toward containment. The masters of influence don't persuade with volume. They create a vacuum others rush to fill, with information, with concessions, with revelations they never intended to offer. This isn't manipulation, it's psychological gravity. Jung found this pattern across cultures and contexts. The person who can fully contain their emotional energy, not by suppressing it, but by transforming it internally, becomes a force that alters every room they enter. Not through force, through presence. He spent decades studying human behavior, patients, mystics, monks, political leaders. And across every culture, one truth kept emerging. Psychological power always flowed toward those who had developed internal containment. What exactly is containment? Jung defined it as the capacity to hold opposing forces within the psyche without identifying with either. In simpler terms, the ability to feel everything without being controlled by anything. The person who can hold their energy without spilling it doesn't just change a conversation, they change its texture. Most people leak psychologically. Their insecurities, their need for validation, and their unprocessed emotions all spill out. They talk to relieve their own anxiety, not because they have something worth saying. Their emotions drive their behavior instead of informing it. But certain rare individuals develop containment, and when they do, three things happen. 1, they stop identifying with their emotions. I am angry, and start experiencing them as information. I notice anger arising. 2, they develop the capacity to hold contradictory feelings simultaneously without needing to resolve the tension immediately. They gain the ability to choose response rather than being driven by reaction. This quality is so rare that when you see it, you instantly recognize it. Even if you can't explain what you're seeing, it creates a gravitational pull that changes every room, and it changes how people respond to you, subtly, powerfully, almost invisibly, unless you know what to look for. I'll never forget when I first saw this power in action. 10 of us were having dinner at a fancy restaurant, the usual mix of people trying to sound smart and interesting. Everyone competing for attention, talking over each other about politics, art, whatever. Then this guy shows up, no entrance, no need to prove anything, just sits, listens. At first, everyone keeps talking, but something shifts in the room. I keep glancing at him even though he's barely spoken. He's not leaning forward eagerly like the rest of us, not jumping in with "actually" or "I think." He just listens, really listens. His complete focus makes whoever's speaking suddenly very aware of their words. When someone asks him a question, he doesn't rush to answer. He pauses for 3 seconds, which feels like forever, and the whole table leans in without realizing it. When he does speak, his words hit different, not because they're super profound, but because there's no wasted talk, no or like, no desperate need for agreement. Then it happened. Someone makes a joke about prison inmates, a careless comment to get some laughs. A few people chuckle. This guy doesn't laugh, doesn't frown, doesn't react at all, but something changes in his eyes, a slight narrowing, a focus that makes the laughter die out. "I was in San Quentin for 8 years, he says quietly. The table goes dead silent, not because of what he said, but how he said it. No defensiveness, no drama, just a simple fact. Would you like to know what I learned there about human nature? We all did, suddenly, desperately. For the next 10 minutes, nobody interrupts as he talks about finding dignity in a place designed to strip it away. About watching some men break while others found strength they never knew they had. About learning that real power has nothing to do with controlling others and everything to do with mastering yourself. He never raised his voice, never used his story to make himself look good or others look bad. He just shared what he knew, then went quiet again. The rest of the night was completely different. The showing off stopped. The interruptions ended. The conversation became real, not because he took over, but because his presence made fake conversation impossible. I learned later that he was wrongfully convicted, losing his career, marriage, freedom, things that would destroy most people. Yet he radiates a calm power unlike anything you've seen. Not because he hasn't suffered, but because he's transformed his suffering instead of being defined by it. This is containment in its purest form. Social power doesn't flow toward those who demand it, but toward those who don't need it. This is what Jung called the paradox of influence. The less you try to control others, the more impact you actually have. This power of containment works through 3 specific psychological mechanisms that Jung identified through years of clinical observation. First, it creates contrast. When everyone's talking fast, moving more, and trying to be seen, stillness immediately stands out. Your brain is wired to notice what's different. It's like wearing red in a room full of blue. You can't help but notice. This isn't some strategy, it's basic human perception. Jung called this the principle of enantiodromia, the tendency of things to stand out most vividly against their opposite. In a world of constant noise, silence becomes the most powerful signal. Second, it forces others to face themselves. Jung discovered a phenomenon he called projection. We unconsciously place disowned parts of ourselves onto others. When someone doesn't give you the reaction you expect, doesn't mirror your smile, your nervous laughter, your need for validation, those projections bounce back to you. Suddenly, you have to face these patterns in yourself. Most people hate this feeling. They talk more, try harder, work to pull the quiet person into their emotional field. When that doesn't work, they either back away or become real themselves. Jung observed this pattern repeatedly. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The contained person becomes a mirror that reflects others back to themselves. Third, it shows true integration. Your body can tell the difference between someone holding back emotions and someone who has processed them. Holding back creates tension you can feel. Integration creates a grounded presence. The contained person shows they've already faced what others are still running from. This creates instinctive respect, even from people who find it uncomfortable. Jung called this the effect of the integrated shadow, the unconscious recognition of someone who has done the inner work most people avoid. And once you see this, you see it everywhere. The teacher whose silence hushes a room, the friend who listens so completely you lose your urge to perform, The person at work who rarely speaks, but when they do, everyone turns. It's not magic. It's not manipulation. It's what happens when presence replaces performance. Containment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the nervous system saying, this person has nothing to prove. And when you feel that, you lean in. In Washington, D.C., March 2018, among 800,000 people at the March for Our Lives rally, Emma Gonzalez, a Parkland shooting survivor, takes the stage. Everyone expects another emotional speech, another tearful call for gun control. Gonzalez names the victims, tells brief stories about them, and then she goes silent. Not for effect, for 4 minutes and 26 seconds, exactly how long the shooting lasted. Tears stream down her face, but she doesn't wipe them away. Her breathing stays steady. She doesn't fidget or look away. She simply stands there, fully containing the horrible weight of what happened. The crowd gets uncomfortable. Some people shift awkwardly. Others start crying. The cameras stay fixed on her unwavering presence. CNN cuts away, uncomfortable with the silence. CBS stays but adds commentary to fill the void. Social media explodes with reactions. When her timer finally beeps, she says simply, "Since the time I came out here, it has been 6 minutes and 20 seconds. Fight for your lives before it's someone else's job." Then she leaves. Her silence wasn't absence. It wasn't avoiding expression. It was the most powerful presence possible. In a political landscape of endless talking points, Gonzalez's deliberate silence carried more weight than any speech could have. It forced everyone to feel the reality of those 6 minutes instead of consuming another emotional speech. Not as concept, but as lived reality. Her silence created space where people had to feel their own response instead of just consuming her emotional performance of it. It was a deeper form of communication, presence of the highest order. We evolved beyond simple stimulus response patterns. We developed the capacity to hold experience without immediately discharging it, creating space for choice between trigger and action. Jung called this the development of psychological distance, the space between experiencing and reacting that defines human freedom. This capacity doesn't just improve our decision-making, it fundamentally changes our relationship with reality. In prehistoric settings, immediate reaction serves survival, but in complex social structures, this reactivity undermines us. This creates what Jung called the problem of opposites, the tension between our evolutionary programming and our psychological development. Our bodies evolved for immediate reaction, but our consciousness evolved for reflection and choice. Research now confirms that containment rewires the brain. When we practice holding reactions, we strengthen neural pathways between the prefrontal cortex and limbic system. This builds what neuroscientists call response flexibility, choosing engagement rather than being driven by automatic patterns. Auschwitz, 1944. A Nazi guard discovers the manuscript hidden in Viktor Frankl's coat, his life's work written on scraps salvaged from the camp. The guard tosses it into the stove. Years of work, Frankl's only psychological anchor, gone in seconds. Most people would break, rage, collapse. Frankl does none of these. He feels his grief completely, but doesn't let it consume him. That night, he makes a decision that shows the third mechanism of containment: integration. Instead of being destroyed by his loss, he commits to rebuilding his manuscript in his mind, to live his theory rather than just write about it. This wasn't being emotionless. It was the highest form of containment, holding enormous suffering without breaking under its weight. Under extreme pressure, most people collapse into primitive states: dissociation, rage, breakdown. This wasn't mere personality or stoicism. Frankl had developed what Jung would call the transcendent function, the capacity to transform suffering through meaning. Those who found inner purpose survived. Those who lost meaning died, sometimes by walking into the electric fence. Between stimulus and response, he later wrote, there is a space, In that space is our power to choose our response. This wasn't just philosophy, it was survival. And Jung would recognize it as perfect integration, containment, not as weakness, but as ultimate strength. This creates not just psychological survival, but a form of freedom that exists beyond external circumstances. The power comes not from bottling up emotion, but from transforming it internally. Your culture's obsession with constant expression isn't natural. It was engineered through 3 historical revolutions. To understand where we are, we need to understand how we got here. Before the 1800s, most Western cultures valued restraint and rationality above emotional expression. The ideal person wasn't someone who expressed everything they felt, but someone who mastered their passions through reason. Then came the Romantic movement, a revolution in how we think about emotions and self-expression. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, one of the movement's founders, argued that civilization had corrupted humanity's natural emotional expressiveness. Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains, he wrote in 1762. Those chains, he believed, included the social expectation of emotional restraint. William Wordsworth championed the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings as the basis of poetry and authentic living. Percy Bysshe Shelley declared emotions the great instrument of moral good. Lord Byron embodied this new ideal, the passionate, expressive individual who refused to conform to social expectations. The Romantics created a new ideal. The authentic person was someone who expressed themselves fully, rather than someone who contained themselves wisely. Restraint wasn't seen as mastery but as artifice, a fake social mask rather than true strength. This shift was revolutionary. For the first time in Western history, expressing emotions became more valued than containing them. The next major shift came with Sigmund Freud and the birth of psychoanalysis in the early 1900s. Freud observed that many psychological problems seemed connected to repressed emotions and experiences. His famous talking cure was based on the idea that bringing unconscious material into conscious awareness, expressing what had been hidden, could heal psychological wounds. Unexpressed emotions will never die, Freud noted. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. This medical model of expression as healing created a powerful new belief. Holding in emotions causes sickness. Letting them out creates health. While Freud himself had a much more nuanced view, his ideas were often simplified in popular understanding to mean that any form of emotional restraint is psychologically harmful. Carl Jung, initially Freud's protege before their famous split, took a different view. He saw that expression without transformation often just spread psychological contagion rather than creating healing. There can be no transforming of darkness into light and of apathy into movement without emotion, Jung acknowledged, but he added a crucial distinction. But we must not remain in it. We must be able to communicate without being tangled up in our own complexity. The third shift was economic. As consumer capitalism evolved, marketers discovered something powerful. Emotionally reactive people make better consumers. When we react emotionally rather than respond thoughtfully, we're much more likely to buy things we don't need, to engage with content that doesn't serve us, and to participate in social systems that exploit rather than support us. Our economy profits from your reactivity. Every ad is designed to bypass thought. The average American now sees between 4,000 and 10,000 advertisements daily, each one carefully designed to provoke an emotional reaction that leads to consumer behavior. This created a perfect storm, a culture that views containment with suspicion, thanks to the Romantics, treats expression as healing, thanks to Freud, and profits from emotional reactivity, thanks to consumer capitalism. So now your culture tells you, express to heal, perform to be seen, react to matter. Every platform teaches you to speak before you've even thought, to vent before you've metabolized, to post before you've understood, and slowly, containment became a threat. Silence became weakness, depth became dangerous, but it wasn't always this way, and it doesn't have to be. Understanding containment means seeing the clear difference between before and after integration. Before integration, you talk to relieve your anxiety, you react to feel real, your energy leaks through unconscious channels. Your presence follows what others expect. Your words come from compulsion. Your silence feels like suppression. You exhaust yourself managing impressions. After integration, you speak by choice, not compulsion. You feel without needing to express. You channel energy with precision. Your presence reshapes expectations. Your words come from clarity. Your silence feels like fullness. You save energy through authenticity. This isn't black and white, but a process of growth. Integration isn't something you achieve once, and then you're done. It's something you develop through continuous inner work. Jung called this process individuation, becoming who you truly are beneath the social masks and defensive patterns. It involves 3 key phases. 1. Confronting your shadow, facing the parts of yourself you've denied or rejected. 2. Integrating your animus, balancing your internal masculine and feminine energies. 3. Connecting with the self, finding your authentic center beyond ego identification. You begin to feel the difference between a reaction and a response, between what's urgent and what's true, between what deserves your voice and what doesn't even deserve your breath. And the world notices, even if it doesn't know why, because people can feel the difference between someone pretending to be calm and someone who's truly rooted, between someone faking peace and someone who's built it brick by brick. That's what Carl Jung meant when he said, "The meeting of 2 personalities is like the contact of 2 chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." When you enter a room with containment, you don't just influence others, you transform the atmosphere itself. Most people only know 2 ways to handle emotion: express it or suppress it. 1. Express them, seen as healthy. 2. Repress them, seen as unhealthy. But Jung identified 4 distinct types of response that create a more nuanced understanding. 1. Suppression, consciously pushing emotion down out of fear, unhealthy. 2. Repression, unconsciously denying emotion exists, harmful. 3. Expression, discharging emotion without transformation, temporary relief. 4. Containment, holding emotion until it transforms, your growth. Most people only recognize options 2 and 3, either hold it in or let it out. But Jung discovered that the most psychologically developed people access option 4, containment that leads to transformation. This isn't just theory. Modern neuroscience confirms that when we practice containment, we literally rewire our brains. We create new neural pathways between the prefrontal cortex, rational thinking, and the limbic system, emotional reactivity. This builds what neuroscientists call response flexibility, the expanded ability to choose engagement rather than being driven by automatic patterns. The English poet John Keats called this capacity negative capability, the ability to remain in uncertainty and doubt without irritably reaching for fact or reason. The Zen tradition calls it beginner's mind, the capacity to experience each moment freshly without being controlled by habitual reactions. Throughout history, what Jung called containment has been recognized as the marker of wisdom across diverse traditions, not because it denies emotion, but because it transforms it. Jung's insights become practical when we understand when to contain and when to express. Stay quiet when your reaction would just be defending your ego. The situation needs presence more than words. Your emotions are too hot to be useful. Speaking would be more about relieving your discomfort than addressing the situation. Someone is trying to bait you into losing your cool. Your silence is already communicating something important. Speak up when the silence has made its point. Your words come from clarity, not reaction. The moment truly needs your voice. You're expressing from choice rather than compulsion. You can speak without needing a specific reaction. Your expression serves something beyond your need to be right or seen. The key is learning to tell the difference between these situations. To know when you're containing and when you're avoiding. When you're expressing strategically and when you're just venting. This skill comes through practice, and practice begins with a simple but powerful pause. Jung called this the development of psychological distance, the space between experiencing and reacting that defines human freedom. This capacity doesn't just improve your social interactions, it fundamentally changes your relationship with reality itself. We've now entered a new era where constant reactivity isn't just encouraged, it's becoming who we are. The chronically online personality has emerged as a distinct psychological type. It's someone whose identity has merged with their reactive online presence, constantly responding, commenting, reacting to everything that crosses their feed. You know these people. Maybe you've become one yourself. The person who can't see a post without immediately forming an opinion. The friend who's always in the middle of an online argument. The coworker whose mood follows the algorithmic outrage of the day. The family member who can't stop sharing their reactions to every news item. This isn't just behavior anymore. It's becoming personality. Studies show that heavy social media users actually experience physiological withdrawal symptoms when unable to react online. Their nervous systems have literally been conditioned to require constant expression. This creates the ultimate modern trap. A personality built entirely on reaction rather than response, on constant expression rather than thoughtful containment. But here's what Jung would recognize immediately. The more common this reactive personality becomes, the more powerful containment becomes by contrast. In a digital landscape where everyone is constantly performing reaction, the contained person stands out not just as different, but as something many people have forgotten exists, a truly free human being. This changes everything. Understanding containment isn't just learning a new concept, it's the beginning of becoming someone new. After watching this, you won't be able to unsee the pattern of reactivity in yourself and others. You'll start noticing when you're being driven by the need to express rather than the choice to respond. You'll recognize when others are trying to pull you into their emotional field rather than respecting your boundaries. This knowledge will stay with you, working beneath the surface, reshaping how you see social interaction entirely. When someone tries to bait you into an argument, you'll remember this essay. When social media algorithms flash outrage-inducing content, you'll remember. When you feel the compulsion to defend yourself unnecessarily, you'll remember. And in that remembering, you'll find the space to choose differently. This isn't a technique you'll use once and forget. It's a lens through which you'll see human interaction differently forever. You'll come back to these ideas again and again, not because you watched a video, but because they speak to something profoundly true about human psychology that you'll now recognize everywhere. In a world where most people are becoming more reactive by the day, you'll be moving in the opposite direction, while others merge with their digital reactions until they can't tell the difference between triggered emotion and authentic self. You'll be developing the most powerful quality a human being can possess, the capacity to choose response over reaction. This doesn't mean you'll achieve perfect containment overnight. Integration is a lifelong process, not a one-time achievement. You'll still react. You'll still get triggered. You'll still say things you wish you hadn't. But each time you remember to pause, each time you create space between trigger and response, you're literally rewiring your brain. You're developing what Jung called the containment vessel, the psychological capacity to hold experience long enough to transform it. And as that capacity grows, something remarkable happens. You begin to stand out, not because you're trying to, but because you no longer need to. Your words carry more weight. Your silence creates more impact. Your presence becomes a force of its own, not because you're performing containment, but because you're embodying it. This is what Jung meant when he wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That choice, To become someone who responds rather than reacts, who contains rather than leaks, who transforms rather than transmits, is now yours. And once you make it, you'll never see yourself or others the same way again.